Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
This is the More Money Show. I'm Steve Moore, economist. I want to remind people that you should be getting our Unleash Prosperity daily email, which is absolutely free. It's something you can buy, purchase. You don't have to purchase it. You just sign up for it at unleashprosperity.com and keep up with all of the important economic and political news every morning. Newt Gingrich tells me it's the first thing he reads every morning. So I hope it will become the same for you. By the way, I don't know if any of you are taking Trumpinol, but this is a new drug that just hit the market a couple weeks ago, actually, for anyone you know who is suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. If they take 2 of these Trumpinol pills every day, we are told that by the FDA that will work and stop the Trump derangement syndrome. Does anybody know anybody with Trump derangement syndrome? Maybe we got some listeners who have Trump derangement syndrome, but it is out of hand in this country right now. There was a fellow down the street from me who bought a Tesla and had a Tesla parked on the street, and it got spray painted the other day. So this kind of vandalism and violence. And by the way, don't you remember, folks, that just less than 6 months ago, probably, certainly less than a year ago, we were told we had to buy electric vehicles. And the manufacturers had to manufacture the electric vehicles because we needed these to save the planet. Remember, everybody was going to have to stop buying gas cars and buying electric vehicles. And the number one seller of electric vehicles, of course, was Tesla, owned by Elon Musk. And now they're spray painting, vandalizing the Teslas, and they are boycotting Teslas. And by the way, we all have a right as Americans to boycott whatever we want. I don't drink Bud Light anymore, but, I just think it's ironic. I guess the only thing I can conclude from what's going on with Tesla is that the left hates Elon Musk even more than they fear climate change. Because wait a minute, if the planet is going to melt away because of climate change and we have to stop burning fossil fuels, then they should like Teslas. But no, they hate Elon Musk because he is trying to show to us all how we can make government more efficient. Does any of this make any sense to you? Because it doesn't make any sense. And by the way, those people who are spray painting Tesla should take Trumpinol. I mean, I know it can work. And I even have family members who are suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. But the guy's doing an amazing job. I have to say, Wednesday or Thursday, I'm forgetting the days. I think it was one of those 2 days. Trump had his big gala at the White House. Many of my associates went to that to celebrate the fact that Donald Trump has finally said he is going to board up most of the Department of Education. We don't need tens of thousands of bureaucrats in Washington. They're not doing anything to help our children learn and read and write. And what he wants to do, he wants to send that money straight to the states and straight to parents so that the money can be used to educate their kids, not to maintain a massive 10,000 blob in Washington, D.C. These regulators and bureaucrats in Washington at the Department of Education, they probably never even been inside a classroom in 20 years. How are they helping educate our kids? So Trump's idea, which I think is absolutely marvelous, and I think it is something that even Ronald Reagan tried to do this and he couldn't do it, shut down as much as possible the Department of Education and the bureaucracy there, and just get the money straight to the states and let them figure out how to best spend it, or better yet, give it to parents, give it to low-income parents and let them choose good schools. So I am so proud of Donald Trump for that. I mean, it was a great day, and Trump is one. The victims, by the way, of our education system, you know this, I've talked week after week after week, that test scores keep declining in this country. It is a national emergency. It's a national tragedy. The left's solution is just give us more money. Just give us more money. We've been doing that for 40 years. We've, doubled the amount of per pupil spending adjusted for inflation, and yet it doesn't lead to any results. And Trump is a very common sense president. He's saying if we're spending all this money, according to the White House, by the way, we have spent $3 trillion. That's $3 trillion with a T on the Department of Education. And over that 40-year period, test scores have fallen. So that's called, a negative correlation. The more Washington spends, the less kids learn in the schoolroom. And I am so proud of the fact that Donald Trump is saying enough is enough. We are going to get that money in the hands of the people who will actually educate our kids. And you've heard me say this a million times. I think great teachers in this country, and there are so many hundreds of thousands of great teachers, they deserve to be rewarded. I think they are underpaid. I think our teachers who really do an outstanding job are underpaid. They are worth their weight in gold. But the problem is, in many places like Washington, D.C., where I am, or New York City, or in Chicago, where I'm from, you can't get rid of the bad teachers. And so everybody gets paid the same, whether they're high achievers or whether they're people just punching a time clock. And that has to change. So my solution is let's double the salaries of the really great teachers and then fire the bad teachers. I want to take your calls, by the way, on the More Money hotline today, 1-800-848-9222. As many of you know, we are live. We're not always live, but most of the time we're live. And so we are live and in color, and we do take your calls throughout the show. And I'd like to ask you what you think needs to be done to solve this national emergency of our schools. Now, some of you may say, what does that have to do with more money? What does that have to do with money? It's very simple. We cannot maintain our economic superpower status if our kids can't read, if they can't add, if they can't do math, if they can't write an intelligent paragraph. This is a national economic emergency. It's an education emergency. And when you have 30 or 40% of the kids that are either dropping out or not learning at grade level proficiency levels, Houston, we've got a problem. And I think Trump is doing everything he can to solve this problem. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take a long time to get our schools back. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it, that our schools were better in the 1950s than they are today. And we're a richer society. I know this, guys. I know that the tests that kids took in high school in the 1940s and 1950s were much harder than the tests that people take today, the kids take today, and yet the kids are failing. So God bless Donald Trump. He's doing the right thing here on the education, but I want to hear your solutions. Are you concerned? Do you agree with me that this is a national economic emergency, that our schools are so deficient, especially in the inner cities? And the Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, and poor Americans are the victims. I knew Trump was doing the right thing when I saw Randi Weingarten. She's the head of the Education Union, the National Education Association. And she was pouting and whining, oh my God, Donald Trump's trying to ruin our education system, and not enough money is going to get into the hands of the schools, and the test scores are going to fall. And I'm, wait a minute, Randi, you've been running the schools for 25 years, and all we're seeing is declining test scores. Something has to change. Thank God for Trump. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about that. If you're a teacher, I know we have teachers who listen to this program throughout the country. I would love to hear from you. You're on the front line. Tell us what we need to do to fix our schools so we can have the smartest and best educated, best skilled kids coming out of high school and college so they can grow our economy. One of the things that I want to do, speaking of education, is I would like to tax university endowments. Now, this is a controversial idea, and most of you know me very well, by the way. I am anti-tax. I want taxes to be low. I don't go around advocating higher taxes. I want low tax rates, a broad tax base. I love the flat tax. I love anything that gets the tax system out of the way of a well-functioning first-rate and first-class economy. But we do need to raise the revenues for government. And we do have a tax cut that Trump needs to get through as quickly as possible. And that is going to cost some money. So the question is, where is that going to come from? Where are we going to get the money from? And I'm looking and I'm seeing university endowments, money that was never taxed, $800 billion. Now, I'm for low tax rates. So here's my proposal. We should put a 15% excise tax on that $800 billion because the money is not being spent to lower tuitions or improve, the education that our kids are getting in college. In fact, the endowments are being used for things like building football stadiums on campus and things like that have nothing to do. Look, I love college football. I love college athletics, but I don't think that should be tax deductible. So I say a 15% tax on these $800 billion endowments. Wait, I'm going to set a limit. Only the schools with over $1 billion. And there are something like about 20 to 25 to 30 major universities with endowments over $1 billion. Harvard has, I think, $55 billion. Yale's at $45 billion. Northwestern's at $20 billion. And it's just sitting there. These are like financial institutions. And what I'm saying is you're going to pay a tax on that. We like education, we like colleges, but but when you've got all this woke crap going on your campus, when kids are coming out of your schools with $500,000 of debt, I'm sorry, you've acted in a way that is not in the national interest, and we're going to tax you. That's the Steve Moore solution. So if my math is right, $800 billion. 15% of that is going to be about over $100 billion, $120 billion. And we could use that to reduce taxes on hardworking families and businesses. I want to hear from you though. What do you think about these ideas of, taxing the endowments of the huge colleges? And what do you think about Trump's idea of letting parents and states decide where the money gets spent, not a bunch of bureaucrats in Washington? One other quick point before we take a break, and I'm going to take your calls right away. Call in right now, especially if you're a teacher or a university professor and know something about this issue. I want to hear from you because you can tell I'm very upset about what's happening in our schools, and I don't pretend to be an expert, but I do know this, folks. What we are doing now is not working. That number, by the way, 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-WABC. One last point before we go to break. Student loans. Now, Biden's solution was just to have the government write off these loans. And that is a non-solution. That is unfair to American taxpayers. Why should people who didn't even go to college have to pay higher taxes for kids who did go to college? I think, and I've said this many times in the past 6 months, I think the solution to this is the universities should, if you're Harvard and you got a kid you educated, and they can't get a job and they can't pay back their student loan, then Harvard, you should pay the money back to the federal government, not the taxpayers. That's my view on those things. I want to hear from you, though. 1-800-848-9222. We'll be hearing from you as soon as we get back. We'll take a quick message back in 1 minute.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. Thanks again for joining. I always say that I am not the greatest radio talk show host, but I do have the greatest listeners, and I get some really great guests too. So let's get right to it. The question that I wanted to pose right out of the gate this Saturday afternoon is about education and what we do to fix it. And I want to go to John first. John, what do you think?
Yeah, Steve, thanks for taking my call. If I can be taxed on my lotto ticket and the winnings go towards education, and if I hit $1 billion, I get crapped on taxes hard. So why can't an endowment, which is just like a lotto hit, for the universities. Do it, baby. Do it.
Yeah, John. Okay, great call. That's 1-0 in favor of my proposal that we start taxing these big fat university endowments. If a school has over $1 billion sitting in the bank that's never been taxed, I think they should pay their fair share. And I'm a guy who is not in favor of taxes, but I do think everybody should pay their fair share. Okay, let's go to Connie. Connie, are you with us?
Wait a minute. I just got out of my car. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, let me get back in the car. The
Thank
thing
you for
that
calling.
I have a problem with here, I think it's great that it's breaking up the Department of Ed, but you have a problem with parents. And I have a few teachers in my family that say this all the time, that they have a problem with the child or no homework or the child sleeping in class, whatever it is. They email them, they write them, they call. The parents never seem to engage with the teachers about the problem with their children. And I think you have to get the parents behind this, or else it's going to fail.
Okay, Connie, great call. We've got so many people lined up. I want to make sure. I'm pleased to see that the lines are really lit up on this question. Who is our next caller, Mr. Producer? Phil.
Hey, how you doing? So I taught political science for many years as a paid adjunct. I'm an attorney. I have a master's in public policy.
Okay, so you got the credentials. Okay, so what do you think? What do we do to fix our education system?
My mother was also a school teacher. I had a cousin who was the head of the New York City School Teachers Union before the current one back in the 30s and 40s. There was a prototype. So I've been following it for a long time. Yes. My quick takes are the following. Yes. They should not get rid of the department. They need to use it, to use the money to create one nation. It's been too many years of...
wait, hold on. So I didn't quite hear you. We need to use it to do what?
We need it to set new educational standards that are
okay.
normal or normative, whichever word you want to use. And because all these school districts are going out onto their own, and to be honest, I don't trust the parents either. There are too many generations of badly educated parents. Even in red states, there are blue districts. There are people who I would not trust. So until you get, 4, 8, 12 years of resetting the bar, I would even go back to the Iowa tests and just see what the kids know these days. Forget about the current standards. Yes. Give them a test from, say, the 50s, the 70s, the 90s, and see how badly we're doing. And as for money for the teachers, I wouldn't double the pay of the good teachers. To be honest, I'm in New York, Long Island. Every teacher I know retires. By the middle of their career, they're a millionaire. Some of that has to do with house values and good insurance. But I would, and again, let me use New York City as an example. They used to have something called the Rubber Room. You may have heard about it.
Yep. About
1,000 teachers just sat around getting paid. They were terrible, but they couldn't get rid of them because of the unions.
I know. So I got to cut you off there. Good points. I agree with a lot of what you say. The one thing I disagree with you on is I think that, look, even bad parents probably can make better decisions for their kids than educrats who don't even know what these kids' names are. And look, we do have a problem with single parent households and things like that. But I still believe I've been involved in the school choice movement for 40 years. These are mostly mothers, that are using these vouchers, that care deeply about their kids. They may not be highly educated, but they know when their kids are getting ripped off and that they're not getting their learning and the school experience that they need. So I'm going to put my money on the parents, not the educators. I think we can squeeze in one more caller, Mr. Producer. Who else have we got? Peter, hi, Peter.
Hello, Professor Moore. I was thinking that about the endowments. What about if the endowments are treated like a foundation, where they had certain they had to maybe pay a 4.5% tax.
Yes.
And spend at least 4.5% of their money or something like that, something which is more akin to what a standard that exists.
Yes. So that's a good idea. By the way, I'm not an expert on how foundations are taxed, but I think it has to be more. I think that you have to have something, when this money is put in tax-free, never been taxed, you get a billionaire who gives Columbia $100 million. It's never been taxed. I do believe that there should be a tax when the money goes into that institution, because we can't have huge amounts of leakage. The problem with saying they just have to spend it is, part of the problem is that they're spending it on things that are not improving the lives and the knowledge of our kids. So that's my problem with that solution. I do think if these universities were forced to let us know why is Harvard sitting on $50 billion? I mean, what do they need $50 billion for? And they're still charging kids $100,000 tuition. Folks, I think that is unfair, and I think it needs to be fixed. We got to take another quick break. We'll be right back. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
And having fun on a Saturday afternoon. I hope you're all having a wonderful weekend. Thanks so much for tuning in. I mentioned earlier that we're going to have some great guests on throughout this 2-hour show. And our first guest is Bob Nardelli. You all know who Bob Nardelli is. He is one of the great businessmen of the last 50 years. He was the chairman of Chrysler. He worked as the CEO at Home Depot. And before that, he was an executive at General Electric during their golden years. So there is nobody, in my opinion, or I shouldn't say nobody, but maybe 2 or 3 people that could rank with Bob Nardelli as an expert on American business. So Bob, first of all, thanks for joining.
Thank you, Steve. Very kind of you as always. It's exciting to be with you this beautiful day.
Okay, so I've got a lot to talk with you about, Bob, and I'm going to start with something I'm concerned about, which is the economy. You texted me this morning, said, "What do you want to talk about?" And I want to talk about business and the economy, and I want to talk about first of all the recession, the possibility of a recession. We're looking at maybe negative 2% growth for the first quarter, which in my opinion, is the residual effect of Bidenomics, but you know, it's clear if you look at the consumer confidence numbers, if you look at consumer spending. I've talked to a lot of, when I just go to the stores, they say, "How's business?" They say it's slowing down. The customers aren't coming in. How do you read it, Bob?
Yeah. Well, Steve, I think you called it right the other day when I saw you on the show. But here's my point of view on this. I think we are spending way too much time on the negative side of what's going on in this country and this wonderful administration, as opposed to the positive side. So, yes, we may in fact see, and you've nailed it, we may see a little negative GDP, and that for sure is a holdover of what we've inherited, just like so many other things.
That's right. From
Biden. Yeah, trying to change. But I think, if I look out there, let me just say, first of all, on the economy, as a father and a grandfather, I couldn't be more pleased with this administration, President Trump's, intentional decisions to close the border. Number one, number two, to repatriate the worst first, and to try and put the hammer down on the lawless society that grew over the past 4 years.
Yep.
And that in itself will fuel the economy. I think we tend to scare the consumer a little bit, because they're used to certainty, as you know, Steve. Their certainty in the market has been tremendously positive over the past period of time. And now, so when they hear that, the airlines maybe are stepping down, to your point, consumer spending is down, retail business is down, those are probably all, in fact, true to some point. But I think our consumers are just, caught up with that more than the positive things. Energy pricing, right? Energy's coming down. Even the price of eggs are coming down.
Finally.
If you think about what this administration, just think about the waste and the corruption that they have identified, which is going to be able to return, hard-earned dollars back to all of us in this economy. I heard, the announcement earlier about Tesla. Again, these are hard-working Americans in a corporate American corporation that not only has a lot of payroll going out, but also supports a lot of retirees in the 401k. So let's not try to, let's not kill the golden goose here of what's happening in the first couple of 100 days under this administration. I could not be more positive about what's happening. Look at the repatriation of trillions of dollars committed back to reestablish this as a manufacturing center globally, Steve.
So, Bob, all excellent points. I wanted to, in the previous section before you came on the show, Bob, we were talking about education, and I was talking about how I had waited for 40 years for a president to do what Donald Trump did this week, which was declare. You might have just heard that clip, folks, from Donald Trump that was played on the news, where he said, we spend more than any other country on education, and we're getting really bad results. So we're not spending the money very efficiently. We can't have a first world-class economy, Bob, if our kids are not getting educated.
Yeah, just think for a moment, Steve, about what you just said, and the comment that was made the other day: 47 cents of every dollar never gets through the center, the headquarters.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't get to the faculty. So, yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, if there were, look at how nonprofit organizations are scrutinized. You with me? Like Tunnels to Tower. 96%, 97% of every dollar goes to individual to support our veterans, our brave men and women out there.
Right.
Why is it the Department of Education, kind of skims the top to take care of themselves? And, I've got 4 children, I got grandchildren, and I'm looking forward to choice and being able to get these kids educated, in a number of dimensions. Certainly COVID has had the most profound negative impact, masked up, not being able to really learn in a classroom. And we need to get that energy and that commitment by the faculty back into this classroom for our younger children that are, the next generation that's going to be running this place, Steve.
So you were at Home Depot, which is how many people does Home Depot employ? I mean,
when I was there, we had a modest 350,000.
350,000. Okay. So you know a lot about the workforce. You're probably one of the world's experts on the workforce. Now this was, what years were you at Home Depot?
Steve, I transferred, as you noted, from General Electric into Home Depot at the end of 2001. And, we started at $40 billion. And when I left, we were $91 billion. Wow. We'd opened 1,000 stores during that period, one every 24 to 48 hours, went from 0 to number 1 in Mexico. So, I've been blessed to have a team of men and women that, I had to be careful when I asked them to do something because they usually did it. They were so full of energy and positivity about and bringing globality to the business. And that's what that's what this administration is going to foster, that kind of energy, can do. Resource these people, give them clear direction, and then turn them loose.
So there's very few people in the country then who have been on the front line of, dealing with our workforce. And I wanted to ask you this question about the quality of the workers, because I'm concerned, when we have kids who can't read the diploma out of high school, that makes it very difficult to employ them. But what would you say we need to be doing a better job of to get people ready for the job market?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I was up at Columbia the other day making a presentation, and that came up. So I think, first of all, we got to get back to the basics. And you said it a couple of times. We got to make sure we're teaching math and that the children are learning math, that they're learning reading, that they're learning the basic fundamentals of finance. When I was in high school, and that's, decades ago, we had a course called citizenship. Where did citizenship go? My senior year, we had government.
Well, we called it civics back then, but we had that. You had to know we knew what the Bill of Rights was. We knew the Constitution. Yes. We knew all of these things. I don't think most kids even have that anymore.
Well, I would say, let's look at the deterioration. I went to high school in the state of Illinois. And look what that's deteriorated to over these couple of decades. So we need to do that. The other thing I really believe strongly, Steve, is that AI is going to eliminate the entry-level jobs in this country. And so we got to start training these young men and women for the next level job. For example, if you go into one of the financial firms, the auditing, taxes, whatever. So the entry-level job where you had internship and you learned, right? You did an internship. We got to get these young men and women prepared for the next level when they graduate to be able to compete out there, Steve. So, yeah, I think we have to up the game totally and in both high school and university.
I'm talking to Bob Nardelli, who, of course, is one of America's premier businessmen. He was an executive at Home Depot. He was an executive at Chrysler. He was number 2 or 3 under the great Jack Welch. And I know you've told me this before in private, but, Jack, you must have learned a hell of a lot about business from Jack Welch.
Well, I would say that I am blessed. I'm very fortunate to have spent 30 years underneath Jack's tutelage. And, if you don't listen and learn, you'll never be able to lead. And he did a magnificent job. I think what we've lost in Jack Welch and inspirational and creative leaders like that, we see it all the time now, Steve, right? Major conglomerates are breaking up because they don't have the skill set to run them. And a conglomerate has a tremendous competitive advantage given the ins and outs and the ability to serve various industries, take them through the peaks and the valleys that everybody has. So I'm disappointed to see, of course, the way GE went. Now we see Honeywell going that way. And I think it's just a lack of capability to run a massive organization with different technologies, different channels to market, and certainly brings a tremendous level of globality to business, Steve.
So you obviously have been an outstanding chief executive yourself, and you work for one of the great CEOs of all time. I'm always curious about what it is that makes a CEO effective. Is it vision? Is it, their business acumen? What is it that sets these people like you and Jack Welch apart?
Yeah. Well, again, I was very fortunate. We had a very, very disciplined approach to running the businesses that we were, entrusted to with the responsibility to run them. And there were things like, stretch goals, right? Rather than negotiate, I want 5 and he wants 15, we agree at 10. Let's just go in and set a goal, not an outrageous goal, but one that stretches us because we'll see things and do things we otherwise would not have seen. That you create a culture of can do versus why not. That you really have a childlike curiosity about everything you're talking about, looking at, and doing. And you do have to have a strategic vision. And mine was always, we got to enhance the core, we have to extend the business, and we have to expand the market. And when you talk to 350,000 associates, you got to have them under one of those verticals, or they're not going to get a good review, right? So again, you have to innovate, or you will evaporate, and change will be the only constant, is what we grew up with, Steve. So all of those sound bites really were actionable items that we embraced and lived with and ran our divisions and our companies with.
So we have a lot of young people, actually, believe it or not, who listen to the More Money Show, and a lot of them are just, in their early 20s or mid 20s and looking ahead for their career. And that's a tough time, to figure out what direction to go with in your life. What advice do you have for, the young people who want to, be successful in business or whatever it is in life? What do you think are the 3 or 4 keys to young people in terms of getting on the right course?
Yeah. The first thing is to, the toughest job you'll have is finding a job coming out of the universities today. Yeah. Even if you're, from high school, you decide you want to take a different route. You have to work tirelessly to try and get that first job. And hopefully it's in an area or a business and industry that you love. And then I would encourage you, don't try to grow too fast vertically, because you won't have the base to be able to, run a more complex organization or do.
So what does that mean? I'm sorry. What does that mean to not grow vertically? What does that mean?
Yeah. So a lot of people, that I competed with when I first joined General Electric in 71, right. They came from Ivy League schools and they were very smart and a tremendous amount of advantages. And they wanted to, get promoted almost every 12 to 18 months. Vertically. They want to get to the top as fast as they can. But when you get there, it's like a tree, a strong wind. If you don't have a good base, you're going to blow over.
Right.
And so I embraced horizontal promotions when I was there, so maybe it wasn't a higher level or more money, but I had valuable knowledge that allowed me to run complex organizations, big organizations, because I took the time to really get granular in my understanding of every aspect of business that I was afforded the opportunity to run, Steve. And I think that's back to this childlike curiosity. You have to apply yourself. And it's not about working harder. Sometimes we get hung up in work-life balance and working hard. It's not working hard. It's you have to put in the time to get the job done. Just put in the time. It may take you longer. Took me longer than some other people. You got to apply the time to get the job done. And don't worry about 8 to 5 and punching the clock. That's a different career route. Let me tell you that.
You're listening to Bob Nardelli, who's one of the top businessmen in America from GE and from Home Depot and Chrysler. So when I was young, starting my career, Bob, one of the things I always tried to do, even from the first job when I was an intern, was to be the best. I wanted to be the best intern. I wanted to be the best research assistant or associate. This idea of going beyond, what everybody else was doing, in some cases that meant working more hours or just doing things to stand out. And that seemed to serve me pretty well. I mean, I see young people who just kind of punch the time clock. They do their time, then they go home. And, that doesn't seem to be the ambition and drive that's going to get you ahead.
Now, you make a couple of excellent points there. One of the things I'm very proud of is at Home Depot, we had Desert Storm and we had a number of our associates called up for active duty. But at the end of the day, we hired 35,000 veterans and 500 junior military officers. You know why? Because they understood team. They understood commitment. They understood responsibility. A lot of people want authority, responsibility, but darn few want accountability and consequences for non-performing. So these were men and women that were well-disciplined. The officers program, they never let me. They would do a 2-year rotational program, come out and run a $100 million store, and they never let me down. Never, ever let me down.
So, Bob, we have literally 1 minute left before we have to take a hard break. Last question. U.S. or China, who's going to lead the world over the next 50 years?
Yeah. Well, certainly we are.
And why is that?
Well, if you think anything other than that, if you go into the Super Bowl and say,
you can't win.
I'm really just playing to come in second. You'll come in second.
Well, what do we have to do?
Well, we have to do what this administration's doing. We got to get control. We got to get control of our negotiations. We got to bring back core manufacturing. We got to educate these young men and women. We have to have global competitiveness. We have to produce products here, not buy products there. And really, we have to act like world leader. The announcement the other day, with the Secretary of Defense and the President about state-of-the-art, military planes, putting people in space like Elon. I mean, you have to act like you're number one before you can be number one. And I don't mean to be arrogant about it, but like you said, Steve, diligent, hardworking, apply yourself.
Great stuff. Bob Nardelli, thanks so much for joining. You are a national treasure and really appreciate your words of wisdom. Now we're going to hear from two of the best in the financial world, Bob and Ryan Payne, and then we'll be right back at the top of the hour.
Hey, it's Ryan Payne and Bob Payne from Payne Capital Management. Of course, that's Payne. Coming to you every week on the More Money Show, talking about the markets, the economy, your retirement. And Bob, man, I'm getting whipsawed every week. My neck hurts from all this up and down in the markets. When's this pain going to end? No pun intended.
Well, Ryan, our name is Payne, and lately in the markets, it's been pain and suffering.
Maybe that should change our name of our firm to Pain and Suffering with all the volatility out there. But, I think it was interesting this last week. We know every day we're uncertainty around tariffs, which makes it hard for businesses to make decisions about, supply chains. There's a lot of questions around that. But what I thought was more interesting is the Federal Reserve came out and said they may cut interest rates 2 more times. And man, if I'm sitting in a money market fund right now, all I've seen is my money market fund go down. Like death by 1,000 cuts. It used to be 5%. Now you're under 4%. And what if the Fed cuts again? That cash strategy is becoming a real bad strategy, Bob.
Yeah, it's like a slow drip of torture, Rye. Every day, the money market fund yield drops by 1 basis point, but 7 basis points a week times 5 is 35 basis. Next thing you know, you're getting 2-3% on your money market fund, and net of inflation and taxation, you're actually losing money.
Well, you're between a little bit of a rock and a hard place, right? Markets are volatile, a lot of uncertainty. So it's like, do you stay in the market? Do you go to cash? But we know interest rates are going down. This is why I think it's really important. You can't really predicate your investment strategy for retirement on what's happening right now in the stock market and the bond market and interest rates. You really got to have it predicated on a plan, because if you're thinking about the long term, you're thinking about income and growing your wealth. There's so many places to allocate your capital right now, but you have to have the right mindset. And again, you got to be thinking about your goals.
Yeah, and I think the big problem is, right, we've had a period of 15 years of what we call U.S. exceptionalism, where so many investors right now have a ton of money sitting in a money market fund or in a T-bill that comes due every 30 days. And the rest of it's in the S&P 500 index fund, which, as you've been saying, is a tech fund in drag dominated by 7 great companies. Well, at some point, a great company doesn't necessarily have a great stock. And those stocks are dropping right now. And I'll tell you, that's been hurting a lot of people.
Yeah, it's like the 2 worst strategies you can have here, right? T-bill and chill is what we call it when you're just sitting in cash or money market funds, because your rate's going down. And if you're over concentrating the market, and if you're wondering, am I over concentrating the market? Right now, because, those AI stocks, MagCap 7 stocks, they've been going down the most right now. However, if you had a portfolio that was better diversified, right? Like Europe's going up right now. Real estate stocks have done fairly well right now. Commodities. You have a lot of different assets in the mix, Bob. It's really lessening that blow on the downside. But most importantly, you're doing what is the most critical for retirement. You're generating income. And that's what is the difference between having a real strategy and not, is having that cash flow coming in no matter what the market's doing.
Well, they always say, right, the market hates uncertainty, right? But we all believe, that you and I personally believe, that the markets climb a wall of worry, right? Portfolios and wealth is created through opportunities, not guarantees. So when you finally get this certainty, you're going to miss the opportunity. And I'll tell you right now, based on my 50 years experience, I see generationally opportunistic opportunities right now, the most attractive I've seen in the last 15 years.
Bob, I love your optimism. But no, it's true, right? You have uncertainty right now. You have seen markets sell off, but the one component that you want to keep your eye on is that cash flow is going up, those dividend yields that you can live off of. Lots of places in the stock market are increasing their dividends. And that's what you need, an increasing cash flow investment that's not predicated on if there's going to be tariffs today, the Fed's going to cut interest rates tomorrow, right? It's based on your goals and it's based on that steady stream of income. And right now you can build a really solid one. And we know it, own the S&P 500. That doesn't cut it. You're getting like a 1.5% yield. If you're sitting in a money market fund, you're already getting under 4%. You're paying taxes on that. You have inflation to factor in. That's not going to solve that problem. That's why you need to get your head out of the sand now and be proactive.
Yeah, you got to stop listening to these talking heads on TV that tell you diversification is de-worsification, right? It prevents you from, creating the wealth you need to retire on, to gift money to your children. So what you have to do is really look at what your goals are and work backwards. And you're going to find that there's an abundance of yield available in different parts of the stock market. There's an abundance of yield available in the bond market. I mean, if you look at tax-free municipal bonds right now, even if you're in the lowest tax bracket, right, they're more attractive than where your money market's headed.
Yeah, no, I mean, you look at an after-tax basis because that's what matters the most here, right? It's not what you make, it's what you take. And right now you can structure things in a way where you are getting tax advantage income on your portfolio. You're not locking it up into an annuity. Oh, Bob, I know you don't like that word. Where your money is locked up, you're paying ordinary income on the actual cash flow that it generates, and you lose your principal in a lot of these cases. Now it's time for having liquidity, tax advantages with cash flow that you cannot live, and this is the time to structure that. You got to be looking at it now.
Ryan, notice that the price of eggs are finally coming down. So is that the end of inflation? I think, unfortunately, inflation is that hidden, insidious tax that we all pay. And it's actually the biggest risk to every single person listening to us right now is inflation. You've got to be certain that you're diversified enough, not just to get a return, but to get that return that is more than inflation, because everything you bought today is going to cost you more in the next 15 to 20 years?
Yeah. So I think we have to think about is you need a increasing cash flow, right? And it can't just be the same income every year. And that's one of the problems when you get an annuity. It's the same income for life. Well, the problem is your cash needs are going to go up over retirement. You also have to think about the taxes on it. What are you paying on it? And also you have to think about a diversified income stream, right? There's a lot of these income investments that are being sold right now, but they're extremely risky. I'm seeing some of these private investments, Bob, that pay like 8-9%. But we have to ask yourself is my principal at risk? And I will tell you, there's no free lunch on Wall Street. Your principal is probably at risk. So you got to be really careful about how you're generating that income as well.
You know, Ron, I used to read the articles in the newspaper, and they'd have these advertisements for different different drugs. But now they actually say it out loud on TV, right? It's like, you know, the side effects of this drug is it basically can kill you. So, you know, all these special investments that are being offered by these different Wall Street firms, you know, you don't have to read the fine print. It's right there in the prospectus. And generally under the risk factors, the number one risk factor that catches my attention every time is that your investment could be completely lost. I mean, you're risking 100% to get an extra 1% in yield. So don't walk from those investments, run from those, but understand what you own and why you own it.
Yeah, simplicity over complexity. The irony is a simpler strategy with lower cost that's easier to understand typically works better. And if you're thinking to yourself right now, okay, Bob and Ryan, I get it. I need a proper strategy for retirement. I need an income that I can't outlive. I want tax efficiency and clarity. Well, here's your shot to do it. We keep 10 slots open for the entire show. If you saved over $1 million for your retirement, Bob and I will run for you our now famous Total Financial Master Plan, and we'll do that with no obligation or cost. It's a full holistic review. We literally look at everything. We're going to build you your own personalized financial portal. There's no other firm out there that will do this work up front. We're going to look at every issue you need to address today, whether it's an income plan for retirement. How do you take Social Security? How do you draw from your portfolio? How do you factor in inflation without running out of money? We're going to put together a dynamic income plan. We're going to look at diversification. Markets have been wild lately. I don't need to tell you. Has your portfolio been like a yo-yo, up and down? Or have you been sitting with way too much money in money market funds? CDs, paralysis by analysis. We'll put together a full investment game plan. We'll show you how to grow your wealth, tie it to your goals, but most importantly, protect it over the rest of your life. And we'll look at fees and taxes. Wall Street loves to sell you those high cost, tax inefficient products, whether it's an annuity, mutual fund, brokerage product, structured product. We'll do a deep dive of every investment you own. We'll show you how to reduce the cost and optimize your portfolio for taxes. It's not what you make. It's what you take. You'll get our full tax playbook. We have 10 slots. If you saved over $1 million for your retirement, you call or text right now.
All you have to do is text or call 844-752-6692. That's 844-752-6692. Or you can just simply call 844-PLAN-NYC. That's 844-PLAN-NYC. If you're one of our next 10 callers, you've saved over $1 million for your retirement. Our team of financial advisors and certified financial planners will help you to design and better execute your own total financial master plan. Now, there's no obligation. There's no cost. There's nobody else in the city that actually do this work for you up front. So text or call right now at 844-752-6692 or just simply call 844-752-6692.
Hey, if you want to learn more about myself and Bob and our firm, Payne Capital Management, of course, that's Payne, simply go to BeBullish.com. That's BeBullish.com. Stay tuned. We got more money coming your way.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Appreciate you all listening. We have great audience. We have a great ratings. And so thanks for sticking with us. We're in our fourth year now doing the More Money Show, and it's the highlight of my week. I enjoy my job, but I love on Saturday afternoon spending a couple hours with you and appreciate the fact that you spend a couple hours with me, or at least part of those couple hours. I know people are traveling around and sometimes you're in your car or sometimes you're doing your house chores on a Saturday afternoon. But I'm so honored to be able to talk to you each Saturday. So one of the things I try to do with this show is I try to educate people about economics, and I try to kind of look back in history and look at some of the most important things that have happened in history and explain why they happened. And I want to talk a little bit about the Great Depression, because my parents lived through the Great Depression. They told me all the time about how hard it was, how hard life was during the Great Depression. I remember my father once telling me that food got so short they were, had to a couple times, eat dog food, because there just wasn't enough food to eat. Those were very, very tough times, for families. And so, the question, of course, is still about what caused the Great Depression. And I know there's some revisionist history here. So I want to try to, shine some light on what the real story of the Great Depression was. And I'm going to try to do this in 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. So I'm going to condense a 12-year period into some critical mistakes that were made. So we had in the 1920s, two of our great presidents, I think Warren Harding, who, by the way, the political scientists think was one of our worst presidents, but he actually was a pro-growth, pro-business, tax-cutting guy. And he sponsored, after World War I, which ended in, I believe it was 1919, when he became president, everybody thought we were going to go into a depression. We did have a 1-year recession, but then Warren Harding was the sponsor of a big tax rate reduction. So the tax rates during World War I went up to, I know they were over 70. I think they might have gone as high as 77%, but let's say they were 70%, which is high enough. Those rates were so high that there's no way we could grow our economy with a 70% top tax rate, because the government was taking 70 cents and you only got to keep 30 cents of every dollar you made. And so Warren Harding had the idea of the tax cut, and then Warren Harding died in office. And then one of our other great presidents, Calvin Coolidge, became president. Keep cool with Cal. And he was from Vermont, by the way. I think he was our only Vermont president. But if you know whether I'm right or wrong, let me know and I will correct myself. And Calvin Coolidge he used to say that the business of America is business. And he was pro-business. He was pro-growth. He was pro-worker. And they cut the tax rates from 70% down to 25%. That's a big cut, 70% to 25%. And the economy boomed. That's how we got the roaring 20s, in part because we had a pro-business president who cut tax rates, reduced regulation, got government out of the way, and we had a boom. The roaring 20s were a true roaring period. And then what happened was that Calvin Coolidge in 1928 decided not to run for re-election. He could have, but he decided not to. And Herbert Hoover was elected president. And unfortunately, Herbert Hoover was a great manager, was a terrible executive. And he was the one who came up with the idea of the Smoot-Hawley tariff. And I mention this because there's a lot of misunderstanding about the Smoot-Hawley tariff and about whether it was what really caused the stock market crash of 1929. People say, how could the Smoot-Hawley tariff have caused the stock market crash when it didn't even pass until 1930, months after the stock market crash happened? And the answer to that question is that there's a very famous book that I recommend to those of you who are interested in economics by Jude Wanniski, who wrote this very famous book called The Way the World Works. And what Jude shows in this book pretty definitively that every time the Smoot-Hawley tariff, which gigantic tariffs to keep out foreign goods, every time the tariff moved more closely to being passed in the Congress. In other words, when it passed the House and the Senate, and then when the president was thinking about whether he wanted to sign the bill, every time it passed, the stock market crashed. And you can see it, you just look at a stock market chart and you'll see the big declines because investors were nervous about that. And then we had the big stock market crash of 1929. And it could have been a temporary financial crisis that was over in 18 months. But instead, we got, Hoover made one mistake after another. Then he said, oh my God, we're not getting enough revenues in because the economy isn't performing. So we kept raising tax rates up again. And so the rates went back up under Herbert Hoover, who unfortunately was one of our worst presidents. And he was a Republican, by the way. And so we got what should have been a short-term financial crisis became a 10-year, depression. Now, as you all know from your history books, in 1932, Franklin Roosevelt was elected president on the New Deal. And one of the great mythologies of economics and history is the idea that the New Deal was some kind of greatest success. It was not. It was not. The New Deal made the Great Depression worse, and it extended it because Herbert Hoover's solution was just spend government money. And so we spent money on a lot of these make work government programs, and some of them were well intended. You had a lot of people out of work. The problem was that you were taking money from the businesses that created the jobs, and then you had all these make work government programs, and it caused some temporary relief, but it did not solve the problem. And so the unemployment rate for 10 years never went below 10%. I never could understand why everybody says, oh, FDR saved the economy. He didn't. He didn't save the economy. By 1940, 8 years after he was in office, we still had an 11% unemployment rate. Does that sound like a success to you? And so it was basically what I'm telling you is the reason we had the Great Depression. And this is apropos to what's happening today and what the kinds of mistakes Donald Trump has to elude and escape. Number one, we had the big tariffs. Now that was a different era because those were passed by Congress. Trump is talking about stuff that can be easily reversed because he's doing it by executive order. Nonetheless, markets don't like tariffs. The second thing we had was the massive increase in income taxes. That's a killer for an economy. And then the third thing we had was runaway government spending. All of those things are negative for the economy. And that is why we had the Great Depression. Incidentally, after World War II was over, everyone was saying, oh my gosh, we're going to have 10 million Americans, soldiers returning back to America. They're going to be wanting jobs. We're going to have massive unemployment and because the government spending after World War II fell from 52% of GDP at the height of World War II in 1944 to by 1947, 1948, it was down to 16%. From 52% of GDP to 16%, and yet we had the post-World War II boom, and that shows that cutting government spending is not bad for the economy, it's good for the economy, because that's what liberates money for private sector investment and spending. Now, I say all of that because I want to make sure that you understand when people say, oh my gosh, Donald Trump and Elon Musk are going to cut government spending and somehow that's going to be bad for the economy. No, it's not. It's not going to be bad for the economy. It's going to be good for the economy. Saving money is a good thing to do. And if you have wasteful and inefficient government and you get rid of that waste and inefficiency, you can put those resources right back into the hands of workers and entrepreneurs who can create more productive jobs. And I believe that's exactly what's going to happen with Donald Trump. Now, there's going to be a little bit of a short-term pain in terms of cutting that government spending because a lot of people live off that government spending, even though it on balance doesn't help the economy. So I am short-term, I'm worried about the economy. Long-term, I'm very bullish. And that is my take on this stuff. So, I know that we have, Steve has been waiting, I believe, on the phone very patiently, and we've got exactly 90 seconds, Steve, to take your call if you're still on. Are you still there, Steve?
Yes, I am. I'm still here.
Sorry to keep you waiting, sir. What do you got for us?
That's not a problem. Actually, my question is kind of old now because, so basically what is happening is my daughter's been going to Catholic school for many years.
Oh, so hold on. Just stop for one second, Steve. So for those who are just joining the show, we were talking earlier about how we can improve education. And I was saying I like what Donald Trump is talking about. So Steve has some special knowledge about that. So go ahead, Steve.
Yeah. So I'm in an area where, all the schools the kids come in from different locations just because they all want to get the same education. So for me, I put my daughter in Catholic school and she's 17 and she's about to enter college. And
how's she doing? How's she doing? Are you happy with the Catholic school?
Yes, very well grounded. Feet are on the floor. Good. Everything is good. My moral values have captured her attention, and there hasn't been any left or right maneuver. It's been straightforward, which is good. Yeah, I don't mind the left and the right, but straightforward is really where I like to take my life.
Yeah,
and I just want my daughter to be able to make choices.
Now, can I just ask you a couple questions? Because I went to a Catholic school for grade school, then I went to public high school. But I mean, by the way, I have those nuns back then. You had the rulers, and they'd smack you on the knuckles if you misbehaved. I still have the scars to show that. Well. But are you happy? Is there discipline? Is it a good curriculum? Do you feel like now is this a girls only school or is it co-ed?
No, it's co-ed. It's co-ed. And
Okay.
I live in Yonkers. It's co-ed.
Yep.
And
Got it.
the school is not the same. It's not the old school way where if you did something wrong, you'd fear for your life.
By the way, they don't do that in the public schools. There is no discipline in the public. I mean, I shouldn't say it's a blanket statement, but in so many of the inner city schools that I've visited, it's just a lot of commotion, a lot of people running around screaming, and it's great, heartbreaking because there are kids who want to learn, but there's so much disruptive behavior that goes unpunished that it's not fair to the kids who are trying to learn.
See, that's interesting because I'm a combination plate. I'm a local 3 electrician, and I work on schools for a living. So I see the Board of Education schools, as well as I also see my daughter's school as she was growing up. And it is. I have to say yes to the way the discipline is in the Catholic school. It's still very strict. I mean, latenesses and tardiness and absenteeism. You get, if you talk too much, the cell phones are kept separate.
Right.
All this stuff has been implemented, and there still is. My daughter, I consider her like a very good student overall. But I've had times where she had to go home and she said, I have detention for what? Oh, I didn't wear this, or I did do this, or I said something, or I rolled my eyes. I don't see that in the way that when I walk around. So,
Steve, let me interrupt you because I've literally only got 30 seconds before.
So my main question is this, because you had mentioned something. I've been paying money into these schools for all these years.
Yes.
I know my daughter's going to college, and I know you mentioned something about that the colleges should give back money when a student doesn't get a job. Correct. Yes. But I'm more concerned about the tax part. How come all these years I've never got any reduction in my taxes for paying for private schools? That has never been issued.
Oh, that's an interesting thing. That. All right, Steve, great call. I'm going to have to think about that. Why, maybe tuition for these schools should be tax free. But what really annoys me is these schools have billion-dollar endowments and they keep raising the tuition on the kids. That doesn't seem fair to me at all. We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. I hope you're having a wonderful Saturday afternoon. I hope you're also getting our More Money hotline. To get that, just go to unleashprosperity.com and pick it up for free. It's a daily email that will provide you with just 5 or 6 bullet items each month with sometimes a photo or sometimes a graph that explains economics. You should get it for yourself. You should make sure your kids are getting it so they can understand how the economy works, how business works, and how we can make America a more prosperous place. Just go to unleashprosperity.com and join the 100,000 people every morning who read the hotline. My next guest is a colleague of mine, Wendell Cox. Wendell is one of the top demographers and transportation experts in the country. And I wanted him to come on because those of you who are in New York City, where our flagship is, WABC, but I know we have listeners around the country, are dealing with this commuter tax issue. And first of all, Wendell, thanks so much for joining.
A pleasure.
So are you following this issue, Wendell, at all about this commuter tax in New York? And I'm kind of two minds of it. I mean, as an economist, I kind of like the idea of congestion taxes to reduce congestion. On the other hand, taxes are so high in New York already. What is your take on this issue?
Well, this has been an issue that has been argued around the world: London, Paris, Stockholm, and of course New York. In New York, and of course, the congestion charge zone in New York is limited to, I believe, below 59th Street. So it's not even a majority of the city of New York. And you think about New York, think about how much the toll is to come in on the Holland Tunnel or the GW Bridge.
Right. I know.
I mean, already people who live in the New York area are paying unbelievable toll rates.
Right.
And my sense is, quite frankly, Manhattan has great challenges at the moment, especially because of the fact that many more people are working from home, and that's working out quite well. And in the long run, this is liable, I think, and it can be the other way, but this is liable, I think, to work against New York's primacy as the business center of the United States.
Wait, say that again. You mean, in other words, because people are working at home, you're thinking
that many New Yorkers, many who used to work 5 days a week in New York City,
right.
in Manhattan, are now working at home. And you see a lot of this. There seems to be a good bit of anecdotal evidence to suggest that people, say in Fairfield County, Connecticut,
I see.
Now come into Grand Central 2 times or 3 times a week rather than 5 times a week. So,
yes.
So I think they need to be cautious.
So is that going to hurt New York City or help it?
Well, what it'll do, it will lead to the further suburbanization of New York City.
I see.
Right now, New York City has a population of about 8.5 million, which is well less than half the 20 million in the metropolitan area. New York has dispersed to become the largest urban area in the world. And by that, I mean the largest continuously built up urban area in the world in terms of land area.
So if you were named the mayor of New York City, and I'm terrified, I'm so terrified that Andrew Cuomo, who killed people during COVID with his outrageous policies, if you were advising him, though, if he were to become mayor, what do you think needs to be done from a transportation perspective? Because look, I go to New York City, Manhattan, once a week or once every 2 weeks, and I'm sitting in traffic just to get from LaGuardia Airport into the city, and then to maybe 6th Avenue takes me over an hour and 10 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's because too many people live in too small an area. It has to
right.
do with has to do with population density, and there really isn't an answer. I mean, yeah, you can improve traffic. I mean, the London congestion charge, which I was the morning it was implemented, I was in the Daily Telegraph opposing it. But I've got to say the things turned out pretty well. But the London congestion charge, for example, covers only a very small area of central London. The Stockholm, similar. And so there isn't an easy answer. And for example, everybody seems to think that transit's the answer. Not the answer at all. You cannot get anywhere. You cannot get across New York by transit anywhere near as fast as you can by car, and that's the truth. Any major metropolitan area of the United States, and that's an issue that is missed by transit and urban planners all over.
So let's talk about mass transit, because this is not just a New York issue. It's really an issue for every big city in America. And everybody wants to build these transit lines, and they want to build light rail, and they want to do this, that, the other thing. And yet your statistics are showing that fewer and fewer people are riding these trains.
Well, not only that. I mean, listen, I was on the LA County Transportation Commission, and in 1980, we put a ballot issue on it to raise money to build a subway system. And I was there, and I voted for it a long time ago. I've changed my views since then. But in any event, what has happened in Los Angeles in 1985, which is the year that I left the commission, we hit our all-time record in ridership, which was almost 500 million annual riders. Today, and that was only with buses. Today, after now 40 years, almost 35, 40 years of light rail and subway, the ridership is down to about 375, and that's before the pandemic.
Wow.
So the point is, everybody seems to assume that transit is an alternative. And granted, New York City is very special. There is nothing like New York City in the country, not even Chicago or San Francisco. Transit is very important in the city of New York. Nonetheless, you can't get anywhere near as many jobs by transit in New York as you can by car. You go across the rest of the country, it is unbelievable what has happened.
You were showing me some of these statistics, Wendell. Sorry to interrupt, but you showed me that in many of these cities, transit ridership just since the end of COVID, from the time before COVID till today, some cities 30, 40, 50% reduction in riders.
That's exactly right, and no one should presume that transit is an alternative to the automobile. Transit is an alternative to the automobile only in one place, and that's to the biggest downtowns. And I don't mean Denver, and I don't mean Portland, but I mean New York, Boston, Washington, Philadelphia, and Chicago.
Right.
And that's unfortunately the problem. So that when you go and look at the big business centers that have built up around the country in the last few decades, places like in Houston, in Dallas, Century City in Los Angeles, etc. These places have very little transit ridership, and they never will have much transit ridership.
So why do we keep hearing, every time we talk about transportation issues in Washington or in big cities, all they want to do is build more rail lines and have more buses. And, incidentally, we're moving towards, in California, they already have driverless cars on the streets. I think people on the East Coast aren't aware of that. That, it seems to me, that will totally change how we get from point A to point B. If you could have a driverless Uber car just at your door, taking you when you want to get there for $5, it's much more efficient than transit. It seems like that would be a big deal in terms of solving some of our commuter problems.
Yeah, indeed. And the nice thing about it is government has little to do with that.
Exactly.
Because the private market makes it happen, just like outside Washington, working at home has been such a success where people actually were required to work when they work at home. But the reason that there is this great affection for rail is, first of all, look at the evening reports on the news where they're done. We always, around this country, which has 350 million people almost at this point, we're all shown pictures of New York. I should below 59th Street, where about 2 million people live. Now, you know what, New York.
So, Wendell, we have 2 minutes left, and I want to just get your you wrote a really great analysis of the new census data, and just in 90 seconds, can you just summarize the cities that are growing and the cities that are not growing, and what are we to deduce from this?
Sure. The headline is that the growth continues to be metropolitan in the decade 2020 to 2024.
You know what, Wendell? We probably have to. We're losing you, and I'll have to get you back on next week because I think I know some of the answers to the question because you and I have talked about this. It looks to me from your analysis that the Southeast is really the area where you're seeing so much growth, and that the Northeast is where the cities are in decline. I wonder why. I think it's lower taxes and less regulation. But Wendell Cox, thanks for joining. We'll get you back next week when we can hear you better. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Thanks for joining, folks. This is the More Money Show. I'm economist Steve Moore. Appreciate you taking some time out on your Saturday afternoon to joining the show. My next guest is one of the top economists in the country, David Malpass. He was the head of the World Bank under Donald Trump, and was also number 2 or 3 in command at the Treasury Department in Trump's first term, and was instrumental in helping us get that tax cut done. David, we got to get that tax cut done. We got to get that thing through Congress and signed, sealed, and delivered.
Hi, Steve. Yes, that's critical. But the steps to get it done are pretty complicated. There's quite a few left. You've got to figure out the budget, this issue of how do you do a reconciliation bill, all of that. Reagan went through that in 1986, so it was a very tricky path to get the huge tax cut that expanded that continued the expansion of the 80s.
And so one of the lessons of that 1986 act that you're referring to, which basically broadened the tax base, David, and lowered the rates, which is something that Arthur Laffer and Milton Friedman and others have taught us over the years, is the basis for a good tax system. And the economy really improved as a result of that 86 act, just as it did under the 2017 Trump tax bill. How do you see things going? I mean, you're an expert on Wall Street. It seems to me when I talk to some of the investment class folks, they're worried about whether Trump is going to be able to get this done before before the end of the year, and that raises the risk of a big tax increase next year if it doesn't get done, David.
Right, and the market is very sensitive to that. So some of the weakness over the last month is because the steps needed are complicated. I do think there is this giant opportunity. So let's talk about the upside. If you could establish the idea of having current policy as the baseline for the budget and therefore for the reconciliation.
And by the way, explain that to our listeners what that means, the current policy baseline, because I'm in favor of that too.
Historically, for 40 years, what the Congressional Budget Office does and the budget process is use the idea that taxes expire, and that only has the benefit of making Washington lobbyists really rich.
Exactly.
Every year they go to Congress and say, last year you had this tax and you only paid for 1 year of it, and I want to do it again, and I'll make donations to your political campaign. And so year after year they do it. And so some of the Trump tax cuts are expiring, and that means that if you don't do anything, you're going to get this giant tax increase that kills the economy. So
let me just correct you one thing. Yep. Not just some, but almost all of the provisions, except for a few, would go away, especially the expensing provision, the middle class tax cuts, the rate reductions. So it's a dangerous proposition to go into next year without extending this tax cut.
Yes, and people might say, well, that's what we've always done, and we get paid really well for doing it over and over again. But then isn't it true that Trump came in with the idea of an upheaval, that everything needs to be improved because we're not in a good spot? So I think it's within Congress's power to use current policy. That means for example, the individual tax rates, the expensing, and there needs to be some corrections on that one. But so many of the provisions can be made permanent, and the huge benefit from that is businesses know how to plan, Washington lobbyists might go actually get a job somewhere else.
So. To switch gears just a little bit, David, the gold price went above $3,000 a couple of weeks, I think, within the last 10 or 14 days, which is a sort of a sad milestone. We don't like to see the price of gold rising unless you own a lot of gold, but usually that's not associated with a healthy economy. And I was looking right before COVID, it was like 1,800, and now we're up to 3,000. That's a big increase. What do you think is going on there?
The risk is that it's like the 1970s when gold went up and up. And what that reflected was too much money within the economy, meaning a devaluation of the dollar. And that meant inflation. So we've had some of that inflation, and the risk is you don't want more of it. I don't think you have to look at the gold price. You know that the dollar is weakening now against the euro, against the yen over the last month. And some of that is because people are looking at the U.S. economy and saying it's weakening. The Fed never talks about this, about the importance of the dollar being stable in order to be the reserve currency. And it is achievable, but I think there has to be talk from both Treasury and the Fed that part of the policy is to be stable. I notice there are two Wall Street Journal articles, can I mention to you, which spell out what the problem is. One, they're both today. One by Nick Timiraos, which says the Fed's monetary policy, quote, aims to keep inflation low and stable with a healthy labor market. So that's a disaster. If you're aiming to keep inflation steady, that doesn't mean price stability. You aren't really matching the mandate, and it hasn't said anything about the dollar. It's going to weaken under that policy. And the idea of a healthy labor market is in the eye of the beholder. The Fed's mandate is to have full employment, meaning lots of people working. And so I think we need to allow the Fed to stick to its actual dual mandate. And the other article is about John Williams, what he said. He's the head of the New York Fed, which is really important. It's the largest of the Federal Reserve banks. It sits in New York, and, you know, there's a lot of gold under the New York Fed, and it does the trading markets. Anyway, he said apparently yesterday, quote, "The Fed made the correct choice by holding rates at a level that helps cool the economy." So here we have spelled out in the last 2 days what the Fed is trying to do, which is cool the economy by having an inflation rate that's permanently going to be non-zero. And so no wonder then people go buy gold because they get worried.
Yeah, so I don't understand the logic of this. You and I have taught, you and I and Art Laffer and Larry Kudlow are supply siders because we want to increase the supply and the productive capacity of the country. So I don't understand the logic of cooling the economy to bring inflation down. That doesn't even make any sense to me.
Correct. And so the Fed needs new models, and they need models that take into account that the production of the economy is really important in holding down prices.
Right. I don't think they do that. I don't think that exists. I mean, every time they see an increase in production, they start, we gotta, worry about inflation. But if you're, as Art Laffer would say, if you're producing more apples, the price of apples goes down. It doesn't go up.
But their model is the idea, if inflation is above your target, then your answer is to slow the economy. So it's just stupid. It's right there explicit.
So I want to, by the way,
Trump got mad.
Yeah. Yep. I was just going to say, this is such an important point, David. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think that it's very elemental to economics. And it pains me that some of these very, quote, smart people at the Fed, where they got 300 PhD economists, have this wrong model in their head. This is why I'd love to see you or another regular economist on this show, Judy Shelton, running the Fed, because you guys have the right model, which is growth is good.
Growth is good. I think you also need to have the Fed be modest and smaller, much smaller.
Right.
Right now they dominate on regulatory policy of the banks. So I want to give you one more complaint. They keep track of how many bank loans do banks make to businesses. Those are called commercial and industrial loans. So it's all spelled out in the data. That hasn't risen for a whole year. It's $2.8 trillion.
That's bad, right?
So
that's a bad sign.
That means small businesses can't go to their bank because the bank says, wait, no, I'm busy loaning to the government. So how do they do that? The Fed is borrowing more from the commercial banking system than the banks lend to small businesses. The Fed borrows $3.4 trillion from the banking system every night, and then they pay this high rate of interest. So they're directly crowding out small businesses across the country. It shows up in the data. And so it's a failure in the model.
How do we fix that problem? Because we need our small businesses to be healthy and not starved of capital.
I think the Fed has a conflict of interest. You can't regulate the banks and be the biggest payer to the banks of interest.
Right.
And so at some point you have to choose. And I think they should not be doing much of either. Their primary job is to try to set the interest rate and allow the economy to operate. They look at the markets, including the gold market, but the inflation markets, the commodity markets, and some concept of what their dual mandate is. Stick to that, and that'll be enough. That would only take a fraction of the number of people that they've got right now.
So, David, I've been, at the beginning of the show, I got a lot of callers asking me about recession. It looks pretty probable that we're going to get a negative growth rate for the first quarter, which I believe is the residual effect of Bidenomics. But I don't think it's a good look for Republicans that when they take over the House, the Senate, and the White House, all of a sudden, we fall into recession. Now, a recession, I think all of my listeners know that that's 2 straight quarters of negative growth. So I think we'll probably get negative maybe 1 or 2% in the first quarter. First, do you think we can avert a recession, and what steps need to be taken right now, David, to make sure that we don't fall into a recession?
I'm not fatalistic about this. Things aren't set in stone. They're changeable by policy. Sure. And so the starting point to, get out of a recession or to soften the blow of the recession is to do positive things for the private sector. Right. And I think that, there's criticism of DOGE for closing government agencies, but think of the benefit to the economy from having those workers liberated. They've been stuck in a government job. They fall into a rut. And they won't want to hear it, but it does give an opportunity to people to think about how they can contribute to the economy in the private sector. So I think that can add the tax bill we already talked about, and generating confidence in policy. The regulatory, think of what Lee Zeldin did at EPA in announcing the regulatory steps that will allow business to start actually investing. Energy, obviously, being one of the big ones.
So bottom line, David, we just got a minute left, is you believe that it's not inevitable that we'll have a recession. You still think that we can sidestep that. And then when Trump's policies really take hold, we could, my line is we could have a boom. What do you think?
Yes, but that means actually executing on the policies that are going on. I'm worried about the way the debt limit is going and this, the delays for the tax bill. Yeah, these are costly. Reagan faced that in 1981, just dismal because they delayed the tax cut. So we don't want to do that, and that's execute on the plan, and I think it'll come out okay.
Me too. That's David Malpass, one of the great economists in the United States, and he was the president of the World Bank, was a number 2 or 3 at the Treasury Department, and one of the smartest guys I know in economics. Folks, that brings us basically to the end of the show. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. I hope that you'll join us again next week. I wanted to just on the way out say, I believe that David Malpass is right. We can elude a recession. We need the president to talk about the tax cuts, get that thing done, get it done by Memorial Day. This is my message because I know Donald Trump is probably listening right now. Mr. President, get this tax cut done by Memorial Day. You got to take a whip figuratively to these senators and get them to act. We've gotten it through the House. I don't know why it's taking so long. It's hurting the economy that they're just sitting there twiddling thumbs and whistling Dixie instead of getting this tax bill done. Because as soon as that tax bill gets done, folks, I think it's going to be like, Secretariat right out of the gates, getting the economy booming again like it was in Trump's first term. Folks, have a great weekend. But before we part, I wanted you to listen to 2 of the best in the business, Bob and Ryan Payne, who are going to give you some first-rate economic advice about how to make more money.
Ryan Payne and Bob Payne back again on the More Money Show from Payne Capital Management. Of course, that's Payne, talking about the markets, the economy, and your retirement. All right, this is the tipping point. This is where we pinpoint the pain point. Of course, that's Payne, having the biggest impact on your wealth right now. And guys, today we're going to do a classic spotlight segment where we actually take a real case we worked on. We talk about an individual or a couple, what they're doing for retirement, how they're planning. We break it down. We say, here's all the pitfalls. Here's how we help correct those pitfalls to get people on their path to financial independence. And Court, you worked on a pretty good case lately. Why don't you break it down for us?
I did. They came to us because they are now starting retirement. And the good news is they were able to retire before age 60, which first of all is a very good feat. But the problem that you're facing when you have an early retirement is you have a long lifespan. So you are planning for your money to last a very long time, and inflation is going to be your biggest enemy. So the first thing we had to do is figure out, okay, is your money going to outlast you, or are you going to outlast your money?
So I'm curious. The reason that they contacted us, my recollection is because the husband was thinking about retiring, correct? Like it was time for him to say, I'm going to live off the land, and I probably need someone else to look at this to see if I'm on track.
Correct. And a majority of their money is in a retirement plan at work. So they didn't have somebody who was managing their money or necessarily to plan with their money. And they were saying, well, this is probably a good time that we make sure our money is actually working for us and going to meet our goals.
So based on your initial analysis, Court, were they positioned so that their money would be in a position where they won't outlive their money, or was their money going to outlive them?
So they luckily in a really good position where we said you can get a pretty conservative rate of return. Like even at a 5% rate of return, they will have more interest, more dividends, and more growth than they need, which means they can have a conservative portfolio and their money is only going to grow throughout their lifetime. But then what I did is I take a look at their investments. And do you guys want to guess how aggressive or conservative they were?
Well, I'm looking at the case I'm looking at the proposal put together, and they're 80% in the market. Now
they are 92% in the market.
They're 92% at risk in the markets, which, that's great when you're 20. You don't have to worry about your portfolio for a long time. And we see a lot of that right now, right? That baby boomers, they're getting into their late 50s, early 60s, 70s, and their portfolios are positioned like they're 25. Now, great when the market's going up, but we know if you're 92% equity, man, oh man, your downside risk is tremendous.
Exactly. And that's what you want to look at, is saying, okay, if you can get a conservative rate of return, your money is going to last throughout your lifetime. This is probably a good time to reposition, because otherwise what can happen is you stay 92% equities. There's a big downturn in the markets. You're down 40 to 50%. That can actually affect your retirement and cause you to go back to work. And that's not what we're trying to accomplish here.
I don't think most folks understand when you are retired and you're no longer having that paycheck come in, that safety net, that you now have to pay your bills with relative performance. When the market's going down, when you're retired, it doesn't seem like it will ever recover. And it's almost impossible not to panic in that scenario. And I've seen that happen. We had that in 2000 and 2008, where we had clients who wouldn't listen to what we had to say, fired us, ended up, going somewhere else. And then a year or two later, come back knocking on the door saying, well, we only have half left. Could you take us back and put your plan back together? I mean, it's funny, but it's sad. It's so sad.
It reminds me of that Mike Tyson quote, everyone has a plan to get punched in the face. But I think what's interesting about this case, and I think this is very indicative of a lot of people right now, is until we put all their assets on one place on a spreadsheet so they could see their allocation, the husband, he didn't even really know that they had this kind of risk. And I think most of us don't realize it's not until we see where our 401ks are, our brokerage accounts are, and how they're all allocated together, that you can really get an idea where your risk is. Because I think most people, it's not intentional that they have that much risk. They just don't know it.
And I think these are problems that a lot of people face, where you are really good about saving your money. You're putting money into your retirement plan at work, but then you don't think about it, right? So you're putting it in there. It's getting invested for you. But you haven't looked at it in years. So you're still invested like you were when you were 20. There's still some cash accumulating. You don't realize how much it is. But it's not something I think anybody should be faulted for. It's just like, you do need to look at this, have somebody do a review, especially every few years, make sure, are your goals still the same they were 5 or 10 years ago, or should you be making changes to your portfolio? I would say probably most people should be, but it's easy to just not look at it, just set it and forget it. And I think that's what happens in a lot of cases.
Yeah, and the other thing too is what I love watching when you do this analysis, we show you how much cash flow could you be generating on your money. As Chris likes to say, who's out sailing right now, is you get a better outcome with income. And, what I love about this portfolio is by re-diversifying it, better spreading the money out, taking less risk, you're able to increase the income by like a pretty sizable amount.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm looking at the analysis we ran, and they're currently generating about $44,000 a year between interest and dividends. And just by reallocating this portfolio, making sure it meets their goals, we're able to increase that to more like $94,000 per year. That's an extra $50,000 of income that you're getting, which means you don't need the stock markets to go up a single dollar. You're just generating that every year. And especially a client like this who doesn't need the money, we're just reinvesting that and buying more investments every single year for you, so that down the line when you need it, you have more that's growing.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I know you're not going to recommend, Court, as you've been repositioning its portfolio. There's this annuity we just transferred in from one of our existing clients, where after 18 years of taking risk in this guaranteed investment, what would you guys guess was their annual average rate of return?
Usually low on annuity. I'd guess 2%?
It can't be lower than 2%.
How about 0.2%? I mean, barely made any money net of the fees from the insurance company. 18 years, they had $200,000 that, with a conservative balanced portfolio would be $500,000-$600,000.
Do we think the insurance company is taking a lot of fees out of that? I wonder. But they say there are no fees. I don't get it. And I think that's the wild opportunity right now, right, is by just allocating your portfolio to liquid assets, because annuity, once you turn that income stream on, it's not liquid, is you can generate a huge stream of income right now by having, real estate in your portfolio, having real estate investment trusts in your portfolio, having energy pipelines in your portfolio, having a global portfolio where the yields are higher. There's just so much value in having diversified sources of income, and you can do that with a liquid portfolio where you don't have to lock your money up. It just drives me crazy.
You guys know the bulk of my clients have been retired for a long time now. They have income streams that have been generated year after year. We just transfer, a fixed amount of money to their checking account wherever they live locally. And I got to tell you, the conversations I've had with them month after month, year after year, is never about the stock market or the bond market or even the tariff tantrum that's going on in the market right now. We talk about their grandkids. We talk about their golf game. We talk about their boating trips or their cruises. I mean, it's just amazing how comfortable it is to be in retirement, to truly have a portfolio that can outgrow inflation and, continue to give you the lifestyle that you want, that all of us want, when we do finally retire.
If you saved over $1 million for your retirement, myself and Bob and our team at Payne Capital will run for you our total financial master plan, and we'll do that with no obligation or cost. It's a full holistic review. We literally look at everything. There's not a firm out there that will do this work up front. We go as far as building you your own personalized financial portal. We give you a bird's eye view of your entire financial life, and we'll hone in on every financial issue you need to address today, whether it's that income plan for retirement. How do you take Social Security? There's a lot of ways to take it, but one right way for you. How do you draw from your portfolio the most tax efficient way? We'll give you a full income plan, factor in inflation so you don't run out of money. We're going to look at diversification. Markets have been all over the place, up and down. Has your portfolio been extremely volatile? Or have you been sitting in cash? Paralysis by analysis. Can't figure out what to do. We'll put together a full diversified investment game plan, show you how to grow your wealth, tie it to your goals, but most importantly, protect it over the rest of your life. And we're going to look at fees and taxes. Wall Street loves to sell you high cost, tax inefficient products, whether it's an annuity, mutual fund, insurance product, brokerage product. We're going to go through every investment you have, deep dive. We're going to show you how to reduce all the internal costs and optimize your portfolio for taxes. It's not what you make. It's what you take. You'll get our full tax playbook. We literally have 4 slots left. If you saved over $1 million for your retirement, all you need to do is call or text at 844-752-6692. That's 844-752-6692. If you call or text us right now at 844-752-6692, that's 844-PLAN-NYC, 844-PLAN-NYC.